And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show, ladies and gentlemen. And as promised, we are thrilled to have back Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, South Carolina. As if you didn't know. Welcome back, Senator. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always my pleasure. And you know, you've been one of the voices out there who will not let Benghazi go, and God bless you for that. And I think I speak for millions of Americans, and certainly for 4 American families who don't want to let this go. The president was interviewed by Bill O'Reilly and before the Super Bowl, and basically what it came down to for the president is, well, you know, our diplomats serve in dangerous territory, and they know that. Just in my mind, just disgraceful.
Yeah. Well, I think the main thing is Bill did a good job, but he said, well, I said from the get-go, within the first week, this was an act of terror. Here's what's happening on Benghazi. The noose is beginning to tighten. The president got away with it. It was 7 weeks before an election. They tried to create the narrative this was a protest caused by video, because the truth that it was a pre-planned terrorist attack by al-Qaeda operatives, a former Gitmo detainee leading the charge, would have undercut the narrative created by the president about his foreign policy successes. Bin Laden's dead, the war's over in Iraq, winding down Afghanistan, and al-Qaeda's on the run. Benghazi destroys that narrative, and it was the first sign of what's going on in the world today, the rise of al-Qaeda. So the real story in Benghazi, beyond the 4 dead Americans, which is heartbreaking, tragic, is the failure of Obama's foreign policy.
Yeah. Oh well, the failure of his foreign policy is evident all over the world. I mean, with regard to Libya, yeah, with regard to Syria, with regard to Egypt, with regard to Israel. I mean, it doesn't stop.
Right. It started in Benghazi. It was the canary in the coal mine, and really, the truth that we have to get to the bottom of is how could Susan Rice talk about a protest caused by video on the 16th of September, 5 days after the attack, when the CIA station chief, who was on the ground in Benghazi, sent an email on the 15th to the deputy director of the CIA saying this was not, and he underlined not, an escalation of a protest. How could she then, with that information known to the CIA and to the White House, come out with a story on 16 September saying there's no evidence of a terrorist attack, no al-Qaeda involvement, al-Qaeda is on the run, the consulate was substantially, significantly, and strongly secured? How could she come up with such a story that is politically helpful to the president based on the facts we know today?
Yeah, great question, Senator. And I want you to hear something which disturbed me, and I talked about it at length yesterday, and this is Congressman Darrell Issa on with Bill Maher on Friday. And I was kind of shocked at this because he basically restated, in my mind, what the purpose of hearings into Benghazi, or what's left to find out about Benghazi. And he didn't reflect what you're saying. He basically just almost echoed Hillary and the left in saying we have to make sure it doesn't happen again. Here's what he said. Cut 10.
The fact is, Benghazi is a story of making sure it doesn't happen again. It's a story of will the system work when an ambassador says, I need more security, and instead he gets less security at a time in which the British pulled out of Benghazi because there were 2 attempts to kill the ambassador, one of which, quite frankly, blew up the car and killed his driver. We had a situation in which we should have pulled out of Benghazi or put a lot of security in there. We did neither.
So it's not connected with Hillary Clinton being Secretary of...
Here's the amazing thing. The person that is responsible from our investigation is the Undersecretary, Patrick Kennedy. He's a career non-political appointee.
All right, so, and this was not the first statement he made. He said that originally, and Bill Maher said, well, if that's all it is preventing it from happening again, I'm on board with you, but you never said that. I sense a change here. He let Hillary off the hook. He said it's not about, he didn't say it's about holding people accountable. He just said it's about making sure it doesn't happen again. I'm kind of taken aback. Are you?
Well, Darrell Issa has done as much as anyone to get to the bottom of Benghazi, and I really admire what he's done on the Oversight Committee. He's a good guy. He presented Greg Hicks to the world, who was the number 2
right
on the ground, and he said when he heard Susan Rice talk about a protest caused by video, his jaw dropped, because he was the last person to talk to Chris Stevens, who was on the cell phone with Chris, the ambassador, as the attack was occurring, and Chris says, gotta go, we're under attack. Not one person from Libya ever told the Washington State Department there was a protest. They always said it was a terrorist attack. But it is about accountability. The Secretary of State is likely to run for president, and she'll be talking about her life story, which is accomplished. She'll be talking about her attributes in her time as Secretary of State. She has said repeatedly that she did not know of the additional security request to enhance security at the consulate from the time it was attacked in June until it was overrun on September 11th, even though the Secretary of Defense knew about the request for additional security. So she's in charge of the State Department. The consulate was attacked in June. They blew a hole in the wall. Are you telling me the Secretary of State never asked any questions or made any inquiries about a consulate that had been previously attacked? How could the Secretary of Defense know about the request for security? So she's either out of touch or that's not true. And this is, one, a question of accountability. You know, Chris Christie is being looked at really hard, and he should be, about her closing 4 lanes. And people have been fired. We've got 4 dead Americans, and not one person has been held accountable. So I want to know, is it possible the Secretary of State did not know about security requests coming from her ambassador on the ground in Libya begging for additional security? How is that possible? And secondly, to blame Chris Stevens, the military offered for the 16-person security DOD team to stay, but the headquarters in Washington already had denied additional security requests. He can't go outside his chain of command. And last, about Hillary Clinton. Why did she tell the families when the bodies came back to Andrews Air Force Base
that it was a video?
We're going to get the guy who made this video, when her number 2 was a terrorist attack? And finally, Susan Rice said the reason she appeared on the Sunday shows is that Hillary had a tough week, was too distraught. If that's the case, she shouldn't even think about running for president. Okay. There's a lot to be determined. And if Susan Rice is lying about why she appeared on television, I want to know that.
Great point. So if what you just heard from Darrell Issa is his plan going forward, then there's a difference between you and he right now.
Oh,
correct?
Yeah, I think the Obama administration intentionally distorted the intelligence.
Right.
I think the CIA station chief told the deputy director of the CIA this was not a protest one day before Susan Rice went on television, and for 2 weeks after that, the president himself started talking about a protest caused by video to deflect attention away from what was clearly a terrorist attack, because he is 7 weeks before an election. And I can tell you this: when the commander-in-chief and his team distort intelligence and basically cover up what happened to 4 people in the line of duty for political purposes, that's a very big deal.
We're talking to Senator Lindsey Graham here on the Steve Malzberg Show. You mentioned foreign policy, and we went quickly through some of the trouble spots. But let me just focus on John Kerry right now. Israeli victims of terrorism today lashed out, including one widow in particular, at Kerry for what they call his insensitivity after he inaccurately claimed that not one Israeli was killed by a Palestinian from the West Bank. Now, this is the same Secretary of State who has threatened Israel by saying, if you don't agree to peace, there's going to be another intifada, and more recently said if you don't agree to peace, there's going to be boycotts. I've never in my life seen anything like this from a U.S. Secretary of State towards Israel.
And the European Union ambassador to Israel said that if Israel doesn't agree to a peace settlement with the Palestinians, they will become increasingly isolated through business boycotts of Israel. Now, put yourself in the Prime Minister of Israel's shoes. You've got the Secretary of State basically saying that you would be responsible for any future violence or any bad things in terms of boycotts if you don't sign up to the deal I'm pushing. And now you've got the EU ambassador threatening to isolate the state of Israel if you don't sign up to a peace deal. How can Bibi, under these circumstances, agree to anything pushed by these folks, because it seems like they're trying to coerce Israel into a peace agreement? To focus on Israel being the blame is beyond productive.
Yeah, it's just indicative, I think.
Well, it's just a disconnect
of who our president is. Yeah.
Well, Israel has every right to be concerned about a peace deal that involves withdrawing from Palestinian-held territory. The last time Israel gave up territory to the Palestinians is when they withdrew from Gaza. They've gotten 10,000 rockets in response to that withdrawal. How do you do a peace deal when you got the West Bank in the hands of Abbas, and you got Gaza in the hands of Hamas, the Palestinians are divided. Hamas's charter calls for the destruction of Israel.
Your problem, Senator, is you have too much common sense and you ask common sense questions. Now, we got 1 minute left. Let me ask you, is there going to be anything gained on this debt ceiling being raised?
I hope so. I hope we can get some either job growth or spending cuts if we don't mistake. The new person to focus on in Benghazi is Mike Morrell, the deputy director of the CIA, who received an email from the station chief from Benghazi saying this was not a protest.
Right.
And he turned around, Mike Morrell, and agreed to change the talking points,
Gotcha.
leaving protest in and taking Al-Qaeda out. Something's going on with this guy. He's the new focus in my
Okay, great. We will follow that, and we'll have you back, sir, because I know you'll be following it. Thank you so much, as always, Senator.
Thank you.
Take care. Senator Lindsey Graham, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. When we come back, we are going to turn our attention to the Olympics in Sochi, and we're going to speak to Peter Brooks of the Heritage Foundation because he's been writing about it and following it and how big a threat is terrorism. And are the Russians accepting any offers of help in thwarting any possible terrorist attack? That's the key question, and we'll address it with Peter Brooks when we come back right here on the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio.
The Steve Malzberg Show.